Well, it's good to be here. I'm alive and well, and I hope you are as well. We have a lot to cover. In fact, I really didn't want to overwhelm people tonight, so I purposefully chose a little bit less to make it a little bit more free floating. Well, a lot of things, what do I say? We haven't ever seen anything like this, at least not in my lifetime. I asked my mother, have you ever seen anything like this? And she said no. Other generations have been through a pandemic, and if we compare this one with that one, we're probably in better shape than we think we are. So tonight I wanted to gift you some comfort, help, and hope for healing for anxiety. The interesting thing is, why now? Well, strangely enough, I have extra time, and I've always thought to do this. And now that we are kind of at a stay-at-home mandate, that here I am, and it has caused me to slow down. If we have a pandemic or we don't even have a pandemic, the question is, how do we take care of ourselves anyway? Taking care of ourselves is vital. Um, I, I'm reminded of this research by researchers in psychoneuroimmunology. The idea is our thoughts can affect our immune system. And if we are wanting to stay safe and healthy, probably the first thing we can do is help reduce stress, reduce anxiety. This fear is different than other fears. A lot of the work I do, including my own life, is fears around things that actually haven't even happened. Afraid of my own thoughts. In fact, I have a book that's actually kind of funny. It's called My Mind is Out to Get Me. And so the difference is, in this case, the fear is actually real. We should have appropriate levels of fear. We should think about our loved ones, how we take care of our bodies, our minds, our spirit. And I think becoming preoccupied with this is where it could become an unhealthy fear. So fear is a God-given signal to us that something is in front of us that we need to be aware of, that we need to stay safe. And so if I see a rattlesnake, then I would appropriately take the measures I need to do to stay away from that. If I am thinking thoughts that are catastrophic and there really are no rattlesnakes or bad things happening, or I imagine all these things that could happen, like, gosh, they're late from the store, maybe they're dead. That's a bad habit. And that can turn me into chronic tension, control freak experiences, things that I really don't need in my life. If I'm prone to this anyway, then what's going to happen when there really is a pandemic? Strangely enough, a lot of people I know have calmed down. They actually are, it's a different type of fear. It's a fear that it's not so much about what's going on in my head, or what we could call fears of things that aren't happening. It's actually right here and now. So it's really a different experience. But fear is a signal that's clean and clear, given to us to stay safe. The other types of fears, like ruminating, obsessing, catastrophic thinking, stuff that would keep us up at night, we can call noise. It's not a clear signal. It's static. It keeps us, and in fact, if you listen to static, it grates on our nerves. It just makes us not feel good. So how do we reduce the static in our lives and just listen? And I would believe it's good to listen to our own hearts, to listen to God's voice, to listen to clean media. So we may be getting too much information anyway as a society. We have Google to help us, and I'm not putting it down. It's just that, do we know how to use Google, or are we just inundated with too much information? And this information, I think, actually could be affecting our nervous system. Never before do we have a little pocket device, that I can run to Google, how do I make the lasagna? Google, what's the temperature? All this stuff. And I think it's just too much information. And with this, now we're getting coronavirus alerts. And do we really need to think about this all day long? Probably not. I think it's human nature to want to know what's going to happen next. It's human nature to want to have some semblance of control. And maybe that's why we're shopping a lot. Just buying food and probably toilet paper just to make sure that we don't run out. I'm not quite sure why toilet paper. If I wanted to be funny, I could suggest that Freud, when he talked about the anal stage, is that need to be over-controlled, and maybe there's something going on there. I had seen that some people thought that you could actually get the virus from just not being clean. I don't know, it's just very fascinating. But what's interesting is it's contagious. As soon as other people started to go buy it, then you think, well, it would be kind of nice to have that. So then do I buy some? Not because I think we're going to run out, because they did run out. And so then it creates this false direction. I wonder about that. Do we go down the wrong path just because other people have gone down that path? Do we stop our life and totally just think about the coronavirus, or do we think about it moderately and then move ahead and move on? I got this from my priest, my pastor today. I thought it was very interesting. I'm going to read it with you. It's a poem that someone has written, and there's a couple of them that are quite interesting. It says, we've all been exposed, not necessarily to the virus, maybe, who even knows. We've all been exposed by the virus. Corona is exposing us, exposing our weak sides, exposing our dark sides, exposing what normally lays far beneath the surface of our souls, hidden by the invisible masks we wear. Now exposed by the paper mask we can't hide far enough behind. Corona is exposing our addiction to comfort, our obsession with control, our compulsion to hoard, our protection of self. Corona is peeling back our layers, tearing down our walls, revealing our illusions, leveling our best laid plans. Corona is exposing the gods we worship, our health, our hurry, our sense of security, our favorite lies, our secret lusts, our misplaced trust. Corona is calling everything into question. What is the church without a building? What is my worth without an income? How do we plan without certainty? How do we love despite risk? Corona is exposing me, my mindless numbing, my endless scrolling, my careless words, my fragile nerves. We've all been exposed, our junk laid bare, our fears made known, the band-aid torn, the masquerade done. So what now? What's left? Clean hands, clear eyes, tender hearts. What Corona reveals, God can heal. Come, Lord Jesus, have mercy on us. As many as been baptized into Christ have put on Christ. Fascinating. I think once we get over the shock of this, that we can use this whole experience, like everything else in our life, for good. And I think that's what I want to focus on tonight. It's good to acknowledge our fears of the uncertainty, the fear of what could happen to us financially, how can nations get along or not get along, how will we be as people, will we hug each other, will we get back to the way things were, will there be another virus? If so, could it be worse? I mean, there's all kinds of things that we could be plagued by in terms of fear. I've heard in the 12-step program that they said that the fear is robbed us. It's a thief. It has stolen more from us than probably anything else if we struggle with fear. And it's probably stealing us of our life. If I'm worrying about what's going to happen a month from now, is it robbing me of what's going on right now? So interesting. But if we turn this around and see this as an operation, and this sounds kind of global, but I thought, the whole world might be immunized by this virus. It might cause us to reach out more to each other. Why are we staying at home? Maybe two reasons: to protect ourselves from the virus. But I think most importantly is to not infect others. I think that's why most of us are staying home. I think a lot of us would take the risk and say, I'd rather take the risk. But I think the fact that we could pass this on one to another and to another and to another. Never before, well, that may seem strange to say, it may be too strong, but I'll just say it as never before do we realize that our lives are interconnected, that we can pass things on to each other. And it's times like this that Mr. Rogers said that his mother told him to look for the helpers. And the helpers are on the front line working with people. And I get kind of emotional looking at what's happened in other countries where these tired doctors and nurses and medical professional people are out there helping. Yeah, it's something to see. Can you imagine? You think your job is going to be like this, and now it's like that. Yeah, real interesting. So, how do we take care of ourselves? There's a few ideas I came up with. I think there's a couple of things. To get rid of the noise, to slow down, to spend time a couple of times a day being quiet. It is quieter in my neighborhood. And I wanted to actually do a meditation even through this stream, which seems odd for me. By the way, I'll confess, I'm so used to speaking publicly. I'm not used to speaking to a picture of myself talking, but I will endure that. So let's do a meditation together. I think this might be good, and we can close our eyes only if you're feeling comfortable. And of course, take a few deep breaths, reminding you that this life-giving air is given to us daily, moment by moment. There is a certain sense that this gift of life is given to us, and we so quickly run and do all these things that we just don't appreciate the fact that I am a living being. And if there's financial worries, you could probably set those aside for at least 5 to 10 minutes. If there is muscle tension in your shoulders, your back, your arms, that could be probably set aside temporarily. As you breathe in, breathing in the life-giving oxygen. As you breathe out, you can breathe out the tension. Breathe out the worries. And if you have lots of thoughts because of anxiety, it's okay to just let those thoughts be there. With practice and time, the thoughts will begin to become less and less. And setting aside the fears of the coronavirus, the state of the economy, the feelings of being kind of in your own home, trapped and having to do this. Let your mind wander to what good can come out of this. How can this connect you more with God, yourself? Connect you more with those around you? Connecting you more with the basics. What's the simple things that we need? Letting go of the complex and the shallow. And embracing the simple and the deep. Even if you have not achieved much relaxation in this exercise, most likely you have achieved some. You have relaxed just a little bit, which can bring more blood flow to the right areas of your brain. It helps you stay engaged on what's important. What you really want to do in the next few hours or the rest of the day. And taking a few more breaths. It seems time is appropriate and right to come back. You can come back to a waking state, feeling refreshed and alert, ready to face the situation. So, we can see that just taking a moment out of the day to do this, we can do really pretty well. There's an area of the brain, well, there's lots of areas of the brain, but I'd like to talk about a few. I was thinking of the limbic system today. If this is your limbic system, this on top of it would be your prefrontal cortex. Okay, I don't know how you see that. This inner part is very emotionally driven, appetite, sexuality, sleep, mood is all part of this limbic system. And the limbic system is what keeps us in self-preservation. That fight or flight response is in the limbic system. It's very binary. It's very all or it's nothing. It's not really, 5 solutions. It's much more fight or flight or freeze. But freeze really is just flight. It's just I'm not taking my body with me. It's like emotionally I've left. And I thought about this, and I'm not trying to have a big, let's put down the media, but this was interesting to me that how the media is actually geared towards our limbic systems. So think food, appetite. We actually have food channels. People can watch and have their appetites driven. And here we are, for those whose faith tradition is Great Lent, we are trying to say no to our appetites, to not always get what we want. So the limbic system's fascinating that way. The media appeals to our need for, sexuality, which I won't spend a lot of time on, but that's part of the limbic system too, and sex sells. Our sense of mood. So we may watch a movie, and what mood am I in? Do I want to watch something funny? Do I want to watch something sad? Do I want to watch something suspenseful and scary? Well, that's the limbic system. Like if movies, documentaries were really, really boring, it might just have to do with the frontal cortex there. I'm not totally sold on that. I think that there's probably some emotional processes there. I think compassion is in the front part of the brain, the neocortex. But I thought of this, and I never really thought of this before, is in preparing today, that fear, the media uses fear, and we've heard this. If it bleeds, it reads. That's an old newspaper slogan. And so if it's something that can frighten us, we know that we're more likely to click and see what it is. We're more likely to purchase it, but we don't have to purchase it. It's free on the internet. And yeah, we have been inundated with, if you eat this fruit, you could get cancer. Or quick, the doctor reveals you better do this to save your health. So most of us are jaded towards that, and we go, yeah, right. But this, it really drew us in, at least drew me in to watch it for a while, and to want to see what's going on, and to see which countries are affected. And yeah, it was a little bit fear-based, but I thought, is fear entertainment? And is this really good for me? I do think that we can wear out our nervous systems. I think hearing too much, and I'll confess a little bit, when I've worked a lot with people with trauma and stuff, my nervous system gets wore out a little bit. So I need to exercise, I need to eat right, I need to sleep. Not perfect at that, but I do my best. But then often I want something lighthearted to focus on and to entertain myself. But the reality is I probably get the most help through asking God for prayer and asking God for help, and going to a church service which is quiet sometimes or meditative. It's really a comfort. And now with that not in our lives, I think it's going to cause us to go inward and to really ask ourselves, God, are you there? What do you want me to do in the midst of this? Think 12 steps. I like the 12 steps. Step 11 says we sought to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of God's will. Step 1 is admitting powerlessness over blank, and your life's unmanageable. So this qualifies. We can't manage the coronavirus. We can influence it some or affect it some, but we can't really control it. So we are powerless. Powerless doesn't mean helpless. It's just that I don't have the power that I think I do. That's the great illusion. So the limbic system is what's triggered during the media. And if we can limit our media, I think now I try to only look at certain sites that I think are reputable. And I really do see now these clickbait or things as trying to, how do I say it, try to entice me to look at another angle of the virus or another epidemiologist or another solution. So it's hard to know what's relevant and what's not relevant. In fact, when people have anxiety, like huge chronic anxiety, the brain starts to think everything's relevant. And maybe you have experienced that. That if you had a panic attack and you're going, what caused that? Well, I was at a grocery store. Maybe it was the grocery store. I ate this food. Maybe it was the food. I mean, I can relate to some of this. Like even maybe it's a toxic chemical in the rug, and so we start to be frightened of everything. It's just the way the brain works. It's a good mechanism because it takes into account any possible situation that could be causing this. But chronic experience of that is going to wear us out. And so we probably need to put a limit on that. Once we've gotten all the media we need, when do you want to watch the media? When do you want to know about this? Should we do this late at night before going to bed? Probably not. Early in the morning? Well, if early in the morning you feel refreshed and you feel like you can handle things, I'd go for it. But I believe that engaging God in prayer at the beginning of the day is always a good thing. Am I perfect at it? No. But it's a really good practice to ask God to direct all our thinking. In fact, this comes from 12 Steps as well, that it says we ask God to divorce our thinking from self-centeredness, selfishness, dishonesty, fear, and resentment. Well, good luck on that if you look at the news before you pray. I may not look at the news, but I think it's important to be somewhat informed. So say like I look at the reputable sites, and now am I going to pray about it? Am I going to do something constructive? If I'm not, then I have to wonder if maybe going more not self-sustained, but more local news. More like if it's important to pray for Italy and for France, for Iran, but if I'm just looking and reading and just scaring myself, wearing out my nervous system, it's like me watching all these other people get attacked by rattlesnakes when I only have one rattlesnake. One rattlesnake is enough for me. I don't need 10 or 20. And I think it's just a habit we get into. So, limiting that, and we'll talk later about what to put in our minds. What we watch, we're probably going to have thinking. I have a brain where if I hear a song I absolutely love, it gets stuck in my head. I love it. And it's running in the background all the time. By the way, another point about the limbic system, it's really kind of like a soundtrack. If there's a movie and you see children walking in a field, and the movie's music soundtrack is suspenseful, it's a thriller. But if it's something lighthearted, you'll know by the music. So our limbic systems do tell us, it kind of put us in the right mood for things. And when we're in a good mood, our health is better. Our immune system is better. Studies have shown that our immune system is really affected by our nervous system. The two influence each other. And if we are angry, our IgG immune system goes way down, and it takes about 8 hours for it to get back up. They have demonstrated with patients struggling with HIV and AIDS and looking at their immune response that if they just watched videos of Mother Teresa, all they had to do is watch videos of Mother Teresa helping people, their immune system shockingly went way up. It was just amazing. So thinking thoughts that are compassionate thought, or even more importantly, doing something to comfort others, will help your immune system. I think being part of the solution is very valuable, very valuable. And I hadn't even thought of this word, but fear mongering. I looked it up. That's kind of the opposite, is kind of being part of the solution or part of the problem. The prefrontal cortex, or the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, is the part of the brain that if we can keep it engaged, we'll do much better. That relaxation exercise or the mindfulness training helped engage that. It slowed our breathing down, it slowed the limbic system down. You know you're getting a sympathetic response when your hands are cold. So just by putting them in nice warm water, if they're cold, can calm you down. But when you do the exercise, just notice if you can't allow your body to relax to the point where you're warming your hands. Yeah. Let's see. Well, let's talk about some of the positives that can come out of this. I think it's going to give us time to reflect, time to ask ourselves what's the meaning of life, what's important in life. I bet a lot of us may reprioritize our life. I think good can come out of this. It's in going down the path of what's good. I'm not trying to minimize the pain, the suffering, the panic, the hospitals that can't help people fast enough. And no, that's tragic. It's sad, and I think there's a time for that. But if that's all we're staying in, I think that's where it gets too dark, and I think that's where we're putting our minds where it can be of use. We're perhaps going to slow down. We might be thoughtful towards each other, like going to a grocery store to know that my cart will be used by someone else. And I realize I have this pent-up emotion. There were just simple things that I saw, like in Eastern Washington, there's a company who just started 3 months ago. They're a restaurant. And in the midst of this, they could be worrying about staying open, but what they're doing is making food for elderly and people that really can't get out, and just delivering it to them. It's hard to be afraid and panicked when you're actually helping someone. And it really does, yeah. I had a day where I had lots of back pain and muscle stiffness. Like, is my back just going to snap? Now, the good news is I don't think like that anymore. On a side note, I would highly recommend looking, if you have any kind of chronic pain, to look into the work of Dr. John Sarno or Howard Schubiner. There's a book called Unlearn Your Pain. And it's very similar to what we're talking about. We're growing new brain cells and new neural circuits and keeping the prefrontal, cortex engaged. But I was hobbling out of the car to my chiropractor. And again, at this time of my life, I had so much fear. I thought, gee, getting in and out could just snap the back. And I know that I can get an adjustment and I may not even be that much better. Anyway, I saw this woman, and this is true to, I can't believe this is true, but as I'm in my own little world, this woman actually had a neck brace. She had something with her hand, and I thought she was on her way to the chiropractor. No, she was carrying groceries, trying to lift these groceries into the car. I said, no, 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 no. I said, let me help you, let me help you. So I ran over there. Well, I totally forgot about my fears, my pain, my suffering, because her suffering was worse than me. And in fact, I tried to use cheerfulness to lighten the conversation. And by doing that, I was out of my fear, I was out of my pain. It reduced it a lot. That was the beginning of helping me see how psychological this chronic pain was. I think that's why focusing on the helpers, focusing on how you can help, even if it's a small thing you do, it's a big thing. It'll help you. It is more blessed to give than to receive here. And maybe we give our last roll of toilet paper to someone in need, rather than hoarding. And I will confess, I think of hoarding as people buying gobs of these things, but I realized I did my own fair share by going to the store, maybe buying 2 bags of flour because we might need that flour, and that's fear driven. It's deep down really not believing that I will have provision, believing that I will be okay. So we may be more thoughtful towards each other. We're going to learn to tolerate uncertainty. Boy, that's it. Most of us live a productive or a predictable life. I am going to go to work. I'm going to go shopping after work. I'm going to come home. I'm going to have 3 meals. I'm going to have a bed to sleep in. And I read of and see tragedies around the world anyway. It's just kind of how my heart goes out to them. And I think while I'm sleeping in my comfy bed, what it must be like to be homeless, or what it must be like after a tsunami or a hurricane or a flood, what it must be like for these people to have found themselves in jail, or I work with all kinds of situations. So I have to be careful that I don't over identify and become too empathetic, because it's just too much for my nervous system. But I always know that I seem to be insulated from this, and perhaps my day will come when some hardship will happen, like my wife went through some cancer scares, and that was very uncertain, and we just had to live with uncertainty. And we didn't know exactly the best choice except to pray. And I think that's why I bring up God. But here's the thing, when this is so beyond us, that's the best person who can help us. He knows everything. He created the universe. That's another thing that I have on the list here. We might actually connect more with God. We might slow down and realize we can't solve everything, that we know only a part. We can see through this dark glass dimly. We can't really see with all the clarity. Can we learn to tolerate uncertainty? I think we can adapt. I think we can adapt to be a little bit stronger, to be more resilient. I love the study of resiliency in psychology. How do people survive? I've heard in the last 2 or 3 months stories that, like, I didn't say in my mind, like, stop, don't share anymore. Like, how can it get any worse? And the person still has a smile on their face. And it's not denial. They learn to adapt. It's whether it was through deaths or challenging illnesses or whether it was financial situations. It's just kind of amazing what people can do. If we focus on our weakness can increase. And I'm not talking about the healthy, humble, weakness of how powerless we really all are, but I'm talking about weakness in this noise, this fear static that says it's all going to turn out horrible. You think you're going to change, but it'll never change. That, yeah, we don't need to listen to that. But I'm talking about the strength we have in our weakness, and we know who to go to. Another positive is we might actually raise our standards of healthcare. We might actually, as a society, realize medications are helpful. I'm not trying to put down medications or even just health care. But when it comes down to it, and I'm not a doctor or an expert, but I've heard some medical professionals say that this virus seems to be more severe with people who have less immune system. And where we thought that was just the elderly, it seems like the younger generation are affected if their immune system is not as strong. And could that be affected by diet, by exercise, by sleep? Sleep, I think, is one of the most powerful ways to protect our immune system. Just sleeping and getting more sleep. Exercise. I've had doctors tell me that when we move around and we go on a brisk walk, it's actually helping our lymphatic system flow better. Unlike our circulatory system, which has a heart that pumps, the lymphatic system, I'm laughing because of a pun I could make. The lymphatic system is affected by movement. Now, like a cold shower, can delaminate the lymphatic system and cause it to work more efficiently. So sometimes during these flu season months, I finish my nice warm shower with a cold shower. Believe it or not, it sounds not fun at all, which it usually isn't, but 2 to 3 hours I actually feel great. It's bizarre. Now, I'm not a doctor when I say this, but my doctor said that if you have asthma, don't do this. If you are cold and chilled anyway, you wouldn't do this. But if you have feeling a little bit under the weather or fine, you can turbocharge your immune system by that. Health foods, obviously, there's lots of products out there. I use a ginger root tea. Just chop a cube of ginger, throw it in hot water, I slice it up. With the skin on is what I was told, that the skin is actually really important. This is from Chinese medicine. Elderberry, boy, I'm going down this path. But yeah, we'll probably take care of our own health, reducing stress and fear management, like focusing on our minds on things that are healthy and good and lovely and pure report, things that are of good report. Thinking on things that are bad and scary is probably not good for us. And if you're curious about this, the Simonton Clinic talked about this, and they've done lots of research. And there's lots of research on this. We might cook our own food more. Now, I think restaurants need to be supported as much as we can, but I have a feeling we're going to eat in more, and we're going to learn how to cook some good food and find creative ways to do that. We may end up spending more time with our family just because we're at home. And I love technology. Here I am. I'm on it, but I also tend to put it down. And putting down technology is not always, well, my son and I go back and forth. He defends it a bit, and he's probably right. But I do think too much of technology could harm us. But here's the fascinating thing is technology could help us like never before. Think about it. Years before, if there was a pandemic, you couldn't get word out fast enough. The world was a little bit more isolated. Travel was not as frequent, but we can get word out there pretty fast. We can get test results pretty fast through the internet at our fingertips. We're going to be able to talk with each other through the internet. I'm doing teleconferencing calls, and studies have proven that it's just as pretty much as effective as in person. I do like in person, but it's a good substitute. We're probably going to do a lot online for a while. On the flip side, we may get tired of it. We may actually go for a walk or go to a park or go on a hike or do something very earthy that just gets us out of the house, because we probably will get a little bit of cabin fever. So having an outlook that's positive would be good. I would encourage you to, and this is an old technique, it's been around at least 20, maybe even 30 years, but it's called the gratitude journal or the gratitude list, and it's evolved. It was 3 things you're thankful for each day. And if you do this, the thing is, it's hard to do. We forget, we get busy. But if you stay faithful to doing this, you'll train your brain to think more positive. Now, I had a client call me and said it changed his life. I mean, it was 6 months having not seen him, but he was just so on fire about this. And yeah, it works. But he said, here's the other thing is you write down 3 things you're thankful for and why you're thankful for them. It takes you to a deeper level. And I think it takes us back into our bodies. I think it takes us into our feelings and mindfulness. So what am I thankful for today? Well, I get to try this firsthand live streaming. My critical mind has already judged how it's not good enough and all that stuff, but focusing on what's good is I did it. I've been thinking for a long time to do this, but I haven't done this, and it's taken a world pandemic to do this. Why am I thankful for that? Because I believe there's a loving God who kind of not forced me, but really set it up that I have no excuse not to do this. I have to try to throw out some tools out there that would bring comfort to people. It's giving me opportunity to formulate my thoughts of what would I say to help people with this. So my wife today, as I was busy doing teleconferencing, brought me food in my home office. That was a first. She's usually brought food to my office at work, which is kind of nice. And she had made a really good Thai soup. Why am I thankful for that? Well, first of all, that she's with us. That, she could have passed away a couple of times that I know of, but she isn't. She's with us. And so, that servant type heart is pretty cool to me. I said I need lunch. I just assumed I'd walk downstairs. So I'm thankful for that. I think asking why I'm thankful digs at it. I could say, oh, I got a nice lunch. And maybe the last thing, and you can go more than 3, I think that this pandemic or this crisis is going to cause at least me or people in general to generate hope, to look at how can I purposefully be hopeful here? What do I need to do to be part of the solution rather than just passively listen to these negative thoughts swirling around? And when you hear parts of the media, that's actually hopeful. It's actually quite hopeful. Sorry to be circular there. It You don't realize how weighed down you are until you see something so hopeful. And if good can come out of this, even though there is a lot of pain and suffering, this is good. And boy, how do I say this so that it doesn't sound insensitive? But here's the thing is, have we gone through other pain and suffering? Yes, I've gone through my pain and suffering. You have gone through your pain and suffering. Was there good that came out of it? Absolutely. In fact, with some people today, I said, unfortunately, I've learned more from my pain and suffering than, hey, I'm doing well, and I just decide to even do more well. Like, if it ain't broke, polish it. No, I hate to tell you this. I learned a lot by the school of hard knocks. And when I see that a loving God so allows me to experience that, to shape my character, to change how the inside of me is, that's a good thing. And I think that the coronavirus is an opportunity for us to be more exposed of ourselves and to help heal us from the insides. A great person in my life that I was really quite honored to know sent me this. It's a poem that's passed around by Kitty O'Meara, and maybe you've seen it. And the whole world's on the internet, so it's taking a while for it to load. Let's see if I can't get it another way here. Patience. That's what I need. Here it is, yeah. Yep, it's getting just a little bit bigger so that I can read it without having to put on my readers, which then looks funny in the light. It says, and the people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows, and the people began to think differently, and the people healed. Wow, I love poetry. I'm amazed how people have that gift to put into words something so powerful that you just, yeah, it's a beautiful thing even in the midst of that. Yep, our shadows can be exposed. We can see our dark side. We can see whether we struggle with greed, whether we struggle with not being able to tolerate any kind of uncomfortable feeling, whether we can learn to grow strong during this time, whether we can learn to be patient, to wait this out, to be selective in what we watch and what we listen to. to connect more with God, to connect more with ourselves, to listen to our bodies, to develop new habits, to comfort our own families, and to comfort those that are really scared. Just like I thought of the person helping the person who was worse off than me, maybe we look for someone who could be really quite frightened, reach out to them and calm them down. Maybe that's what we do. Maybe we call someone who we haven't called in a while, see how they're doing. It is amazing that this is a whole world event. Some parts of the world are much more affected than others, but this is something we're all going through. So, I see that we're beginning to wind down here. I hope you find this helpful to you in your life, and I plan on having a better time next time with better preparation in terms of tips and seeing what people want. So you take care and have a great evening.